What do a billionaire playboy, a high school chemistry teacher turned drug lord, and a rum-soaked pirate have in common? They are all considered heroes, but not the kind you would trust to babysit your kids. For decades, heroes were noble, selfless, and undeniably good. They fought for truth, justice, and the greater good, setting an example for all of us to follow. But somewhere along the way, we started cheering for characters who were less than perfect. Heroes who mess up, make selfish choices, and sometimes blur the line between good and bad. So what happened? Did we lower our standards? Or did we just get bored with perfection? Before we started rooting for morally great characters, heroes used to represent the very best of humanity. They were noble, selfless, symbols of what we should aspire to be.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you!
We see these ideals in the early days of storytelling. Think of King Arthur, the noble knight chosen by fate to lead Camelot. Arthur wasn't perfect, but his defining quality was his unshakable commitment to justice and fairness, symbolized by the legendary round table where no man sat above another. Then there is Superman, the gold standard for what a hero could be. Superman is a godlike figure who could have ruled humanity but chose instead to serve it. Superman didn't lie, didn't cheat, and always stood for the little guy. He was a farm boy from Kansas who used his extraordinary powers for extraordinary kindness. Let's not forget Frodo Baggins, the unlikely hero from The Lord of the Rings, a simple hobbit tasked with carrying the weight of the world, literally. Frodo's heroism lay not in strength or skill, but in his resilience and willingness to endure immense suffering for the greater good. Even Westerns upheld this vision of heroism. John Wayne's Cowboys weren't just gunslingers, they were protectors of the weak, fighting against injustice in lawless lands. What ties all these characters together is the structure of their stories. Joseph Campbell's hero's journey captures the essence of the classic hero. They were chosen, tested, and ultimately triumphed not because they were selfish or cunning, but because they had the strength of character to put others before themselves.
I volunteer as tribute!
Their morality wasn't just part of the story, it was the story. Audiences began to wonder, what if heroes weren't perfect? What if they were just as flawed and complicated as the rest of us? And so, the era of the modern, morally ambiguous protagonist was born. We stopped looking for heroes who were paragons of virtue and started gravitating towards characters who were frankly a little more human. They lie, they cheat, sometimes they even destroy more than they save, yet somehow we still love them. First up, we have Tony Stark, the face of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Tony is brilliant, charismatic, and endlessly entertaining. But let's be honest, he's far from a traditional hero. He starts out as an arms dealer profiting from war, and even after becoming Iron Man, he doesn't even shed his selfish tendencies. Take his creation of Ultron for example. Tony's hubris led him to play God with artificial intelligence, and the result, a murderous robot that nearly destroyed the planet. Yet, the narrative doesn't frame Tony as a villain. It presents him as someone trying to do the right thing, even if his actions cause more harm than good. Then there's Walter White, the protagonist, or should we say antagonist, of Breaking Bad. Walter starts off as a sympathetic character, a high school chemistry teacher with terminal cancer trying to provide for his family. His descent into the drug trade feels like a desperate act of survival, but as the story progresses, Walter becomes less a victim of circumstance and more a perpetrator of destruction. He manipulates his family, kills anyone who gets in his way, and builds a drug empire fueled by his ego. Yet, the show frames Walter as someone we can't help but root for, even when he's clearly crossed the line.
Please!
Jack Sparrow, the lovable rogue of the Pirates of the Caribbean, is selfish, manipulative, and more interested in saving his own skin than saving the day. He lies, cheats, and often abandons his friends when things get tough. So why are we so drawn to this flawed protagonist? One reason is relatability. No one is perfect, and seeing heroes struggle with the same insecurities, vices, and mistakes that we do makes them feel more real. Deadpool, for example, isn't your typical hero. He's crude, self-serving, and more likely to make a joke than save the day. But he's also deeply human, someone who's been through trauma and copes with it the only way he knows how, with humor. It's the same with characters like Fleabag. She's messy, selfish, and makes terrible decisions, but we love her because her flaws make her honest. In a way, flawed protagonists give us permission to be imperfect ourselves. This shift toward flawed heroes also didn't happen in a vacuum. It reflects something bigger, a change in how we see the world and the people we look up to. In the mid-20th century, institutions like governments, corporations, and even the church were seen as pillars of truth and morality. Heroes like Superman and Captain America embodied that belief in the system. They fought for the greater good because the good was clear and unambiguous. But over time, those pillars started to crack. Scandals like Watergate exposed corruption at the highest levels of power. The financial crisis revealed that the systems we trusted could fail us, sometimes catastrophically. And with the rise of social media, the flaws of even our most revered figures became impossible to hide. Today, we live in a world where the line between hero and villain isn't always clear. Leaders make mistakes, institutions fail us, and so it makes sense that our stories reflect that same complexity. Heroes who are perfect feel out of touch with the messy, uncertain world we live in. This cultural shift paved the way for the rise of the anti-hero, a protagonist who isn't necessarily good but is undeniably captivating. Tony Soprano is an excellent example. He's a mob boss who juggles brutal violence with therapy sessions about his anxiety. Or Dexter Morgan, a serial killer who justifies his murders by claiming he only kills bad people. These characters challenge our traditional notions of morality, forcing us to wrestle with uncomfortable questions. Can someone who does bad things still be a good person? And how far are we willing to bend our idea of heroism to keep rooting for them? Of course, there's a danger here. When we idolize flawed protagonists, we risk romanticizing their bad behavior. Tyler Durden from Fight Club is a perfect example. Tyler is charismatic, rebellious, and undeniably cool. A character who preaches liberation from consumerism and conformity. But here's the catch. Tyler isn't supposed to be the hero. He's a figment of the narrator's imagination, representing toxic masculinity and unchecked aggression. Yet, many fans of the film idolize Tyler. They miss the point that his philosophy is destructive, not empowering. Instead of seeing him as a cautionary tale, they see him as a role model. This isn't unique to Tyler Durden. Time and again, we see flawed characters celebrated for traits that should be criticized. Jordan Belfort from The Wolf of Wall Street is another example. He's a swindler who ruined lives, but the movie's high-energy portrayal of his lifestyle, fast cars, luxury yachts, and endless parties has led some to see him as a symbol of success rather than a warning about greed. Or take Frank Castle, the Punisher, a vigilante who operates outside the law, often with brutal methods. While his fight against crime is understandable, the glorification of his violence has sparked debate about whether it crosses into fetishizing revenge. The problem isn't that these characters are flawed, it's that their flaws are often excused, overlooked, or even celebrated. Tyler Durden's toxic masculinity, Walter White's selfish ambition, and even Jack Sparrow's manipulative charm became part of what makes them cool. This creates a dangerous dynamic where behaviors that should be questioned, like dishonesty, cruelty, or even violence, are seen as signs of strength or independence. Ultimately, the way a story frames its protagonist plays a huge role in how they are perceived. When filmmakers and writers glamorize the character's lifestyle or downplay the consequences of their action, it sends a mixed message. I understand that flawed heroes are important because they remind us that imperfection is part of being human, but storytelling needs balance. We need to acknowledge flaws without turning them into virtues. When we glorify the wrong traits, we risk reinforcing toxic behaviors rather than challenging them. The best stories don't just ask us to understand flawed characters, they challenge us to learn from them, to see their struggles as lessons rather than endorsements. Thanks for watching to the end of the video.